Hello and welcome to Getting Naked with Happiness with me, Stephen Liu. In this snippet, we hear from Roslina Chai, an organizational consulting expert on creating inclusive work environments in Singapore. In the main episode, Roslina and I talk about what marginalization at work looks like and some of the steps that we can take to make inclusive changes in our workplaces. These snippets are standalone episodes where we tackle more specific questions on organizational improvements, but I will highly recommend that if you are a manager or a leader in a company and you are interested in making holistic changes in your teams, check out the other episodes in this series. Roslina shares so much wisdom on this topic, and I personally have learned so much from the conversation with her. So without further ado, let's jump right in. What are some of the steps that an organization can take to enable non-judgment presence in their managers?
I would like to emphasize that patience is very, very critical to any journey that is worth taking. The first step that I believe must be taken, which many organizations skip, is a mindset change in leadership from creating policies and intervention strategies for the explicit purpose of productivity or profit. Anything that comes with a string attached will always have unintended consequences. I know it sounds like a huge challenge, but given we are in an agile, innovative, experimental mode, I've always been curious why organizations or why not more organizations are willing to experiment with a no strings attached. I care about you as my employee, first and foremost, as a human being. Your well being matters to me, no strings attached. And I want to create a workplace environment where you actually feel excited coming to work. That is the kind of mindset shift that I'm talking about. In conversations where this mindset shift has been discussed, the most common pushback is this unsettling suspicion that if I am being so nice, guaranteed I will be taken advantage of. To which my mental retort is, so you're telling me that you haven't done a good job in hiring decent, kind hearted people, and you actually have hired crooks, which makes you worry about when they're going to cheat you. That's not very great hiring practice. This is what I mean by trust, something I referred to earlier. We pay salaries to have people use their strength to help us build a great organization. But very often we spend even more money to monitor them so that we can buffer our sense of trust or our illusion of trust. Something about the equation really does not make sense to me. Right? So step one is inviting leadership to have an honest conversation about how big of a mindset change do they really want to make when it comes to seeing their employees as unique individual human beings and not as assets in an accounting column at the end of the financial year.
Mm.
Number two, setting realistic goals for your managers. What I mean by that is I've been in the workforce for more than 2 decades, almost two. And it was actually quite alarming for me to see that in the last 10 years alone, there is a trend in corporates for people to multi portfolio, multi title. I cannot tell you the number of times when I receive a name card with so many name titles on it, or I'm working on this project and that project. And I sincerely ask, then how can you give each of this project or responsibility the best of your attention? It is simply impossible. I am concerned that organizations have a very unrealistic expectation of their managers. A more recent example is a social media write up that I was asked to give my opinion on about what managers can do to help their teams through the COVID period. My first reaction reading that article is, jialat, man. Yet another thing the manager has to do, on top of worrying about no cash flow, I have to make people redundant and all these things, yet another thing they have to do. Like, who is taking care explicitly of the manager's well being? Who is empathizing with the many difficult decisions they have to make? Who is equipping them to make these decisions, right?
Mm.
We like to spend money on getting quick results, but essential human development usually requires a long gestation period, and many companies are too impatient for that. So, I would like to invite leadership to reconsider the way which they set productivity or KPI goals for the managers. Again, experiment with under KPI, see what happens. You know, there's a lot of research going on now that says boredom is actually absolutely essential to creativity and innovation.
Yep.
And yet, as a modern society, we are being trained to be scared shit of boredom. We are so good at distracting ourselves that it seems like so many of us are incapable of getting into flow. You can't get into flow if you're constantly chasing the next thing and wishing you have more time in a day. So that's number two. Number three is making explicit, and this may be a radical idea, behaviors of generosity of spirit. Making generosity actually a part of your corporate value and culture. And I have to tell you, in all the corporates we worked with, I have not seen the word or the concept of generosity mentioned ever. What is generosity? Stephen, you and I are Asians. I'm sure we come from cultures and families who cannot stop eating and talking about food. We're talking about dinner when we are having breakfast, kind of families, right?
Yep. Yep.
And then when you go to
Motivated.
someone's house, they really don't care if you're hungry. Eat, eat, eat.
Yeah.
So I'm
I,
using that as an analogy to say, in the corporate culture, we actually are very ungenerous with our attention to other people, with our hospitality spirits, but most importantly, with the capacity to assume the best of our coworkers. Even though we know that humans have a negativity bias, but we are human beings. We are not animals. I mean, we are animals, so we're not. We have the capacity to choose to believe in the better nature of our fellow human beings, of our co-workers, whom, by the way, we actually spend more time with than our spouses for many of us.
true.
So
True.
the third part, to be clear, is to experiment with making generosity part of your core company culture and having an agreement on what explicit, generous behaviors look like. Those are my three proposals.